It is Wednesday. It is the 28th of May. I'm Moon Gon-young. This is ARIRANG News live from Seoul. Our top stories today. At least 20 elderly patients and a nurse are killed in a fire at a nursing home south of Korea. Police are questioning a dementia patient in his 80s. A revised bill being pushed by the government would give fire authorities carrying out rescue operations at a disaster scene the authority to command the police and the military. And about a dozen U.S. fighter jets are set for deployment to South Korea early next month as part of Washington's commitment to security in the region. Now, we'll have those stories and more, but we're going to begin this Wednesday afternoon with a tragic piece of news. Korea woke up to news of yet another horrible accident this morning. At least 21 people have been killed in a fire at a nursing home in southern Korea. The blaze broke out shortly after midnight at the Changsung Hospital in Jeollanam-do province. Our Na Hyung-kyung has the details.
Most of the victims were in their 70s as the hospital specializes in taking care of senior citizens with chronic health conditions. 7 people are still receiving medical treatment, but the number of dead is likely to rise as 6 are said to be in serious condition. Firefighters say the blaze was brought under control within half an hour, but many died or were affected from inhaling smoke and toxic gases. Police have taken an 81-year-old male dementia patient into custody on charges of arson. Officers say they have surveillance camera footage of the suspect, identified only by his last name Kim, going in and out of the room that was found to be the origin of the fire. The room was being used to store hospital supplies and was said to have no inflammable materials. The hospital is suspected of having only one nurse on the night shift for the ward, taking care of some 80 elderly stroke and dementia patients who would have needed physical assistance to escape. Because the lack of medical staff on duty likely contributed to the high death toll, authorities are looking to see if the hospital broke the law by not having enough staff on standby. Na Hyung-kyung, ARIRANG News.
Now, fire departments and maritime safety agency may soon be empowered to take command of the military and police in emergency situations. That is just one of the changes being considered in a set of revised bills spurred on by last month's ferry disaster. The Ministry of Security and Public Administration also said government safety inspectors may be granted power of the judicial police in an effort to boost safety management. Now, the revisions, which also include the establishment of a new Deputy Prime Minister and the formation of a new Safety and Personnel Ministries under the Prime Minister's office, will be formally announced Thursday. Now, after gathering public opinion on the changes, the bill will then go to the National Assembly for a vote. Government restructuring and new appointments. All of these come in line with President Park Geun-hye's pledge to push ahead with reforms in the aftermath of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. But this latest spate of accidents has again laid bare the country's inadequate safety management system, and it's denting the president's efforts. Our correspondent Choi Yoo-sun reports.
The sinking of the Sewol-ho ferry on April 16th and the government's insufficient management of the accident forced many to think about problems and ill practices within the Korean society.
이번 참사로 우리는 고귀한 생명을 너무나 많이 잃었습니다. 그 희생이 헛되지 않도록 대한민국의 개혁과 대변혁을 반드시 만들어가는 것이 남은 우리들의 의무라고 생각합니다.
On Tuesday, President Park emphasized the need to increase efficiency and responsibility within the government by appointing a new deputy prime minister to look after areas outside the economy and security. At a cabinet meeting Tuesday, the president said alongside the current deputy prime minister and finance minister and the head of the National Security Office, the new deputy prime minister should be given the task of overseeing the remaining issues mainly related to education, society, and culture. Officials at the presidential office say the new system reflects the president transferring more responsibilities to the executive branch, with the prime minister in charge of law and order, public sector reforms, and public safety, and his deputies in charge of other areas. The Ministry of Security and Public Administration, which came under fire for its lax response to the recent ferry accident, will have its safety and personnel management roles transferred to new ministries under the Prime Minister's office. And it's anticipated the president will carry out major reshuffles within the cabinet and the presidential office after the June 4th local elections. However, with news of other safety-related accidents causing dozens of deaths this week, it's doubtful whether the president's reform measures will help assuage public anger at the government. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News.
Despite marathon negotiations at the National Assembly over launching a parliamentary probe into last month's Solo ferry disaster, the rival parties remain at odds over a number of critical issues. The talks began Tuesday with the ruling Saenuri Party and the opposition parties divided on the method and timing of the investigation. Now, the families of victims attended the negotiations and stayed throughout the night, demanding a swift agreement. They also warned politicians not to use the accident for political purposes. 16 victims remain unaccounted for and no bodies have been found since last week. And to speed up efforts, the families of the missing have agreed to let authorities cut into the 4th floor of the sunken vessel. That operation is expected to begin in the next few hours. The United States will reportedly have more F-16 fighter jets on the Korean peninsula starting next month. Now, this is according to Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency. United States Forces Korea has plans to dispatch 12 additional F-16 fighters to Gunsan Air Base on June 1st. The 7th Air Force says it's part of a regular deployment to the region that has been ongoing since 2004 to maintain peace and stability in Northeast Asia. Meanwhile, there's been a flurry of diplomatic activity in recent months to jumpstart the long-stalled six-party talks on North Korea's denuclearization. North Korea, however, is refusing to make concessions on its nuclear program. Our Hwang Sung-hee sat down with Victor Cha, Korea chair for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and she asked him whether he thought the talks would resume anytime soon.
Bringing back North Korea to the negotiating table could take some time. In an interview with ARIRANG News on Tuesday, Victor Cha, Korea chair for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said the United States has shown some flexibility, but that its offer remains unanswered.
But I think what the United States is saying is that, look, if you show you're willing to stop testing and allow inspectors back in, then the U.S. is willing to come back to negotiations. It's a sign of flexibility on the part of the United States to keep the negotiations alive. But the North Koreans don't seem to be interested in that right now.
While some view the so-called six-party talks as an old formula, the visiting expert said the multilateral framework is still a valid way to denuclearize Pyongyang. The six-party talks involving the two Koreas, the United States, China, Japan, and Russia, broke down in December 2008.
The U.S.-North Korea bilateral is important because North Korea wants to talk to the United States. But the six-party format is also important because it ensures that whatever agreements are made between the U.S. and North Korea are reaffirmed in the six-party context to ensure that, in particular, the North Koreans comply with the agreements.
Dr. Cha says China could take a stronger role by linking North Korea's economic aid to its denuclearization, but that it's not ready to take that risk.
If they cut off things too severely, they could collapse the regime. And right now, at least their calculation is that that is not worth the risk, even though it means a slowly developing nuclear program.
And the remaining five parties have problems of their own. For instance, South Korea and Japan are at odds over historical issues. Dr. Cha says the friction will affect the ability to coordinate effectively on North Korea, which is why the two neighbors both need to take action.
I certainly think that Japan should issue an apology for the comfort women. But if the Japanese issue an apology, I think the South Koreans have to be ready to accept an apology.
Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-young live from Seoul.
Shopping market for the dual use of the Korean-made East and the Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. U.S. President Barack Obama will remove all troops from Afghanistan by 2016, starting with reducing the troop presence there to just 9,800 and an end to the U.S. combat mission at the close of 2014. The move will mark the first time in Mr. Obama's presidency that the U.S. has not had an active combat mission in a foreign country. Here is our Hwang Ji-hye with this report.
When U.S. President Barack Obama leaves office in early 2017, the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan will be near zero. The president said Tuesday that less than 10,000 American troops will remain in Afghanistan after this year, and roughly half that number will be in the country by the end of 2015. A year later, the United States will pull out its last remaining combat troops.
1 year later, by the end of 2016, our military will draw down to a normal embassy presence in Kabul with a security assistance component, just as we've done in Iraq.
It will put an end to more than 12 years of war launched shortly after the September 11th attacks. More than 2,000 U.S. troops have died in the conflict, plus countless more on the Afghan side. There are currently around 32,000 American troops in Afghanistan. Obama said that so much of America's foreign policy was focused on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that the future of Afghanistan must be decided by Afghans.
Yet this is how wars end in the 21st century. Not through signing ceremonies, but through decisive blows against our adversaries, transitions to elected governments.
The withdrawal plan has not come without criticism in the U.S. as Republicans say the timeline is too tight. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Now, in other news, Korea and the United Arab Emirates, will work together in tapping into other nuclear energy markets, mostly Middle Eastern and African countries, including Saudi Arabia. Korea's Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik said Tuesday that the two countries are not far away from signing an MOU on this issue. Yoon added that the leaders of Seoul and Abu Dhabi reached an agreement in principle during President Park Geun-hye's recent trip to the region, where Korea's technology is being used to build nuclear power plants. Now, Korea will also likely be able to seal the deal on becoming the main operator for the next 6 decades of the nuclear reactors in the UAE currently under construction. The contract will likely be worth some $20 billion. Well, drive around any major city in Korea these days and you'll notice a lot more Audis, BMWs, and Volkswagens than you would have even a few years ago. Well, this is because more and more Korean consumers are buying imported cars. And the Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association says that over 75,000 cars worth over $2.5 billion were imported into Korea in the first 4 months of this year. Now, in terms of volume, this is up 54% from the same period last year. The number of imported cars registered last month also set a record at 16,000. Analysts forecast imported cars to make up 15% of the Korean market this year, which is up from 12.7% in 2013. The newest flagship smartphone by Korean tech giant LG Electronics hits the shelves in 100 countries this Friday, including here in Korea. The next generation G3 has a larger screen than its predecessor at 5.5 inches and a quad HD display with 2 times better resolution. Now, LG Electronics hopes the G3 helps the company take a bite out of Apple and Samsung's vice-like grip on the global smartphone market. In the first quarter of the year, LG had a 4.2% share of the market with sales of $3.2 billion. Now let's take a brief look at the local stock market. Korean shares bounced back in early trading on this Wednesday. In early trading, that is, from the previous session's 2-week closing low, buoyed by robust U.S. economic indicators and expectations for ECB rate cuts supporting risk appetite. As of 1:30 p.m. Korea time, the benchmark Kospi was trading up nearly 0.8% at 2013, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also edged up by 0.3%. Now, on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency was trading stronger against the greenback at roughly 1,023 won. The so-called creative economy has been touted as the next growth model that's going to transform Korea over the coming years and even decades. Now, with that in mind, our Park Ji-won reports on the government's plans to nurture the next generation of creative thinkers.
26-year-old Lee Jun-min and his classmates have developed a program for a simple manual game.
We wanted to create a game that requires interactive body movements like when we played with shadows as children.
And university student Shin Jae-won has been involved in a storytelling business project.
We realize the storytelling industry's immense possible influence on the creative economy, as it can provide an endless amount of new items.
They are some of Korea's young pioneers with creative minds, the fuel that runs the country's creative economy. According to a definition by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, at the heart of any creative economy is the contents industry, which spans diverse sectors like film, music, and gaming. But these sectors are not new to Korea, which has the world's 7th biggest media entertainment industry, raking in some $45 billion in 2012. The nation's contents industry in total logged an annual revenue of nearly $90 billion last year, up more than 4% on year. Zeroing in on its great potential for growth, the government aims to increase its annual revenue further to nearly $120 billion by 2017. As one of many efforts to stimulate the nation's creativity, the first Content Korea Lab, a free public center equipped with diverse facilities like recording studios and video editing rooms, opened in Seoul.
Content Korea Lab is where anyone with creative ideas can gather and fuse their minds with others to initiate new projects.
The Culture Ministry plans to open 10 more centers nationwide by 2017 to act as hubs for inspiring and cultivating even greater creativity for the future. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Well, speaking of creative minds, Korean researchers have developed a device that can supply electricity to trains wirelessly. Now, this is particularly exciting as they say the new system is not only safer, but will allow trains to go even faster. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
This KTX bullet train is able to move as electricity is supplied through high-tension wires installed above the tracks. What you see now is a next-generation high-speed train called Haemu. Unlike the KTX, it doesn't have a device that supplies electricity. Instead, it receives electricity wirelessly through a device that is installed between the tracks. Let's see how it works. The wireless device receives 1 megawatt of electricity from a nearby inverter, which forms a high-frequency magnetic field of 60 kilohertz. A power collector installed underneath the train absorbs this magnetic field and converts it back into electricity, making the train move. Although the technology is already used worldwide, Korea has become the first country to succeed in transferring this amount of electricity. And as it does not require the installation of high-tension wires, it is safer and cuts down on maintenance costs. Researchers say that when the technology is applied to high-speed trains, they will be able to travel faster than now.
When the upper system of the train is removed, there is no speed resistance. This means that the train can raise its speed significantly. As there is no resistance, it also reduces energy consumption.
The Korea Railroad Research Institute plans to commercialize the technology starting next year. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now it's time for our daily arts and culture segment, and today we're going to take a look at a festival hosted by one of Korea's leading universities, which is Ewha Women's University. And of course, our Im Yoon-hee joins me live in the studio to give us a closer look at this event. So good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon.
You attended the opening of this event held at Ewha Women's University.
Right, so I was able to attend last night. Now this is their 8th event, and I was really surprised by how they basically basically transformed the campus into a large outdoor theater. Now, they did set up screens all over so that they can show these artists' works. So now let's take a look.
It's a hard industry to make a break in. And when you're a student, it's not always easy to find an open door. Ewha is a nationally renowned women's university, known for sending women into all fields, including the media. It's the annual Ewha Media Art Presentation, and its presence can be seen scattered throughout the campus.
Our school has been open for 128 years. The campus itself is beautiful and kept like a traditional garden. This event features video art, which is a very technological idea that, when set on this campus background, creates a unique experience.
And when night sets in, the campus transforms into a movie bonanza. The screenings of student productions strewn across the lawns. It's a short 3-night spree, but the event is comprised of 30 young artists from various different countries. The short films are categorized into 11 different genres, all following this year's theme of music and video, something the artists use their creativity to express through their works. Sometimes the audio is just as impactful as the visual. These artists create an experience for the audience, making art out of the relationship between the two.
For this project, I looked at our lives as a stage and wanted to portray the idea that people come into existence through their relationships with others. But there's also trauma in life, which is expressed abstractly through this dream-like video. The music is also important as it amplifies the difficulties and raw emotions felt in the video.
At the end of the day, this festival is just one step on a long journey, but it provides the opportunity these young artists need. Whether it be animation, drama, or just a feel-good movie, this festival is a perfect place for not just the women of the university, but for the friends and members of the community as well.
You know, it's always nice to be back on school campus, and you know, you can really feel the vibe and the energy from these young students. And I'd like to know what the event was like. I mean, I'm curious as to hear who the actual audiences were of this event.
So you kind of saw briefly in the report the screen set up, and they didn't play till dark, which really set the mood for the showings. But it was really neat just walking around the campus. You know, you could see these screens tucked into, you know, the trees. It's a beautiful campus. I don't know if you've been there. So it was really nice to see that. But in terms of people watching, the audience members, the viewers, you could see some students. You could see them with their backpacks, you know, going back and forth to class. But as it is a women's school, there were also, you know, men who obviously are not students there. So it was a good opportunity for the community to check out, you know, what these young artists are doing.
So is this more of a festival, or is there a competing category as well?
Right, so there are no awards per se for this particular event, but the festival did hold many, or did bring in many award-winning artists, and so this year they did get to show these works from artists who are, many of them are from overseas, as well as students from the school as well. So it's a very exciting festival. A lot of people out, you know, beautiful weather these days, so it's a good item to check out.
Right, and a great opportunity for the young and burgeoning artists, but as well as for you know, for the average Koreans, average people here in Korea, to check out what the young minds have, you know, in their as for their ideas these days. All right, Yoonhee, thank you so much for today.
My pleasure.
Now, the early summer-like weather continues, as do that high levels of fine dust. Now, however, the ranges are somewhat better compared to the last 2 days. Now, as you can see, we are under cloudy skies today, and rain is in the forecast in Gangwon-do and Chuncheon-do province this afternoon. Now, it's been warm during the days, and that's about to extend into the evening and morning hours. Now, tropical nights when the overnight temperatures remain above 25 degrees have come a month earlier than the normal. Now, the first one was recorded on Jeju Island yesterday. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 30 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 29 and 25 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 28, Dokdo at 24, while Mankumgang tops out at 19. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanyang.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for that. Definitely not a weather that we would assume at in a month of May, but so hotter today, and I hope you stay cool and dry. I'm Moon Gun-young. Check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time.